Hey everybody, welcome to the Rotowire Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by WynnBET. As always, our exclusive gaming sponsor for the Rotowire podcast this football season. I'm Jeff Erickson here. My guest today is Jeff Paur from RTSports. Jeff is in the top 20, one of the finalists for the Scott Fish Bowl Championship, along with Rotowire's Peter Shanke. And happy to talk to Jeff. Jeff was in my league. He dominated our league. Now he's dominating throughout the playoffs. Jeff, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm great, Jeff. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
No problem. So what's the secret to your success? What got you to the finals here?
That's a great question. I just think it's my quarterback play has been huge. I had both Josh Allen and Joe Burrow on my roster, and they've absolutely had, great seasons. Josh Allen's actually ranked first overall in scoring in this format. As everyone knows, the format's a little different with scoring. So, you get points for first downs and stuff like that. So I have Aaron Jones, David Montgomery too, which are actually 6th and 7th in scoring in this format too. So those guys have really carried me most of the year. And then Adam Thielen had a great year before getting hurt late in the season. Mike Williams too had a great start to his season. Obviously he's faded down the stretch, but early in the year, he really helped me put up some points. And Brandon Cooks too is another player on my team that's really been a great get for me in the mid to later rounds because he's been really consistent, even in a bad Texans offense.
Yeah, he has. Now, you didn't get to have him last week, but you still pulled through okay. And I'm looking. You got Justin Jackson in his big week. That was pretty handy to have. You picked up Josh Palmer. He scored a touchdown. Alan Lazard scored a touchdown last week. You were able to find guys to replace those guys. And you also have a good tight end in Zach Ertz, who had a ton of targets on Saturday night too. And this is a tight end boosted scoring league, so that came in pretty handy.
Yeah, definitely. TJ Hawkinson actually was my number one tight end. I took him with the 4th pick. So it's hurt missing him late in the year, but kind of made up for that with some other pickups, like you mentioned. Damian Harris also, I forgot to mention him. He's been huge. He scored 3 touchdowns last week. So my running backs are pretty solid. I have a lot of depth there that I think's really helped me, especially last week because I missed both Cooks and Williams, but I was still able. I put up a ton of points last week. It was my best week of the season. I picked a good time for that. I scored like 264 points, so that was crazy. So I picked a good time to go all in this contest.
Yeah, you did it without T. Higgins. I was like, okay, yeah, this is probably another T. Higgins guy. No T. Higgins. You did have Burrow though. 525 passing yards does go a long way. Tends to help. And that's the thing is and for people unfamiliar with the format, first of all, it's a super flex league. There's 4 total flexes, or 5 total flexes, I think. There's a lot of flex spots. It's boosted tight end scoring. There's penalties for interceptions, incompletions, bad quarterbacking generally, which is my team. I thought I could, I waited on quarterback in this league, and that did not work out so well. Sometimes it does. It didn't in this particular instance.
Yeah, you can get killed if your quarterback has a bad day. I've definitely seen people get negative 13, 14 points, and that's going to absolutely annihilate you. And that was my goal in this. This was actually the first time I've done this contest, the Scott Fish Bowl, and my goal was to get 2 quarterbacks on my roster after the first 3 rounds because I didn't want to mess with the position. I wanted 2 solid options for my quarterback spot. So that's what I did, and it's worked out well for me in this for this year at least.
Yeah, it sure has. And we were in this together, and I drafted 6th, you drafted 5th. You're right before me. You took Josh Allen. I took Dalvin Cook. So that tells you how our seasons went. I actually made the playoffs. I was happy to do that, but that was about it. It just all around. I kept on finding reasons kept on making the wrong choice. Round 2, I take Cam Akers. You take Aaron Jones. I guess you win round 2 also there, but so it goes because we draft in July. Also, so that's the other thing for people to realize. This is well before the Akers injury, but it's a fun format. I love how it brings people from our industry. It just illustrates there's over 2,000 people in this contest. Illustrates how big our community really is.
Yeah, I agree. It's just an awesome contest because you have guys like us in it, and then regular people can play with us as well, and just brings everybody together. You only have 1 entry too, so I think it doesn't water down the format like some other big contests too. But like you said, it brings everybody together. It's for a great cause. You can donate to the different charities for this cause as well, and it's just just an awesome, awesome contest. And I think it's great that Scott Fish puts this together, because I know it's probably a ton of work on his part, and he's just doing this, to give back to the community and also give back to
Right.
his charities and people that have benefited from this.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's done a fantastic job with that. And it's a super fun contest to play in, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it there. So, yeah, it'll be neat to do this next summer. And the thing is, it's a little different every year too, so it keeps us on our toes too. But if I ever play this format again, I will probably prioritize quarterback a little bit more than I did. I waited till, I don't know, when did my first quarterback was like the 7th round, so I really waited, and it was Ben Roethlisberger, and yeah, that didn't work out so well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I did get Cooper Kupp. Everywhere, and that was useful. But probably the reason I made the playoffs was Cooper Kupp, and only Cooper Kupp, because everything else was just, I'm looking at my draft, I'm like, oh my God, this is a disaster. But so it goes. And it wasn't like I was a visionary. I took Cooper Kupp in like the 6th round, so everybody had 5 bites of the apple beforehand too. So
Yeah. I took Robert Woods. I took him in the 5th round, I think. So I took him for Cooper Kupp, and I actually looked at my draft just like you, because I was wondering how it played out. I had Amon-Ra St. Brown. I took him late, and I dropped him early in the year. So obviously that was a poor decision on my part, because he really could have helped me down the stretch even more with my team, which is solid. But having him, he's been unbelievable these last 3 weeks.
Yeah, and that it illustrates one thing. Even the best teams have some really bad mistakes made in there. We always do talk a lot of NFBC on the podcast, or NFFC on the podcast, our radio shows and all that. Well, usually have the overall winner, and they're like, oh yeah, I made this horrible decision here. And it's funny. Person that's wiping out the field still makes mistakes, unless you're Phil Desal. But he was the robot. He didn't make mistakes at all. But anyways, you're with RT Sports, Real Time Fantasy Sports. You guys have your own playoff contest coming up. You guys have run your own leagues. What are you seeing like for the top teams in your contest right now? Is there any commonality?
It's like you mentioned, Cooper Kupp. He's been on everybody's roster that I've noticed in the top. I do a weekly stream where I look at the top teams, and it's Cooper Kupp. That's the common theme, is him, because like you said, you got him in the 5th, 6th round in a lot of drafts. And I mean, he's been unbelievable. I don't think anybody saw this type of season coming from him. That's been the big theme for me, is him and Jonathan Taylor too. Obviously, there's been a couple teams near the top that have both Taylor and Cooper Kupp. So those teams are obviously tearing it up this year. I know Taylor had a little bit of a down game last week, still not terrible, but not great for his standards. So that likely hurts some teams in the playoffs. But overall, it's Cooper Kupp, Jonathan Taylor. Those guys have just been phenomenal this year, and great values for everybody that took them.
Yeah, those guys didn't get in the end zone last week, breaking long streaks for both of them, but they still got over 100 yards respectively. So still didn't kill you, that's for sure. But yeah, absolutely. They've been fantastic this year. And it's funny, you see teams that are doing well without those guys, and then you really realize they're scrambling pretty well. It's been a weird year because, usually there's some separation with quarterbacks, and in the fishbowl format, there was still, the efficiency matters a little bit, and Allen obviously provided that. But I think that there hasn't been the big separation between the top quarterbacks and the next tier as stark as it has been in previous years. And there's obviously been some ebb and flow there with that too.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. I broke what I normally do. I usually wait on a quarterback in all my leagues, but the Scott Fish Bowl, different formats, so you do that. But I waited in most of my leagues, and I think you could get away with that this year, because guys like Matt Stafford, Jalen Hurts, you could get them after the top guys go, and they've still been near the top in scoring. Even guys like Kirk Cousins, they've been good streamers that have done well throughout the year as well. So like you said, there's not a huge separation this year. So I think that's why you don't see a common theme with a lot of these top teams in these championships with a certain quarterback on their roster.
Yeah, that's right. Before we hit up the top breaking news of the day, I wanted to share a quick note from our friends at WinBet. If there's one thing we appreciate here at Rotowire, it's making good decisions, and even more so, making the right decision. Listen up, folks. I have an incredible offer for you with Rotowire's newest partner, WinBet, the premier digital casino and sportsbook app. WinBet is now the exclusive sponsor for Rotowire's fantasy podcast. WinBet brings you all the latest action with a user-friendly interface, moneyline bets, boosted parlays, over-unders, round robins, live betting, and so much more are at your fingertips. Want a break from sports betting? Head into WinBet's digital casino and take a spin on roulette, double down on blackjack, slam the slots, or try your hand at baccarat. WynnBET is currently available in 7 states: Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Tennessee, and Virginia, while rapidly expanding. At WynnBET, the possibilities are limitless. WynnBET is currently offering all Rotowire listeners a risk-free bet up to $500 on your first wager. Download WynnBET now. That's WYNNBET. WynnBET, the exclusive partner for Rotowire's fantasy podcast. I'm here with Jeff Paur from RTSports. Jeff is in the top 20 for the Scott Fishbowl Championship. He runs a lot of contests over at RTSports. Jeff, I want to talk, though, the big news that we've been talking about, and this kind of broke yesterday, was the change in the NFL and NFLPA's COVID protocols, switching from 10 days to 5 days in terms of the quarantine. It's allowing a lot of players to come back. I just saw news crawling across the wire. Gabriel Davis and Cole Beasley have been activated by the Bills. Previously, they're going to be out 10 days. Davis was going to have to miss this upcoming game. He's now good to go, I guess. And I think we're going to see that with a lot of players this week.
Yeah, definitely. It's huge news because these guys aren't, if they test early in the week, if they test and test positive, they can still come back. I still have a little concerns depending on the severity, because we've seen guys that come back like from last week that didn't do quite great in their first game back from COVID.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of a concern for me, because I don't think it's just, this illness is crazy and you don't know how it's going to affect you. So it's definitely something to watch still. I wouldn't feel, completely great with fringe players that are coming back from COVID quickly like this. But overall, it's great news for a lot of fantasy owners who don't have to scramble quite as much to fill their lineups for these championship games.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a good point. It affects everybody differently. Like Allen Robinson's already missed 2 games. He got activated on Monday, but he said he lost 10 pounds.
Yeah.
And he thinks that conditioning is going to be a problem this week. We'll see. Maybe he just doesn't want to play with the Bears quarterbacks. But, but it does illustrate the point that there are going to be some guys that are going to have different reactions to this, different issues with it. Some would be, it's no problem. And others, we'll see. But the big issue surrounding it is going to be Carson Wentz. With it moving from 10 to 5 days, he now has a chance to be eligible, depending on what time that happened. The news broke at roughly around 1 o'clock Eastern, about 1:15 or so Eastern time yesterday afternoon. Which, doing my little math, that puts us past the 1 o'clock start time on Sunday. However, the test probably happened before that. That's gonna be one of those things. Like, when did he test? When what's exactly 5 days? Is it measured from where? Who measures asymptomatic? These are things that you still have to bring up that are issues.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be tricky because there's more to it than just, the 5 days. You have to not have symptoms, like you said, and supposedly they have to get checked out by a physician too. I think I read that as well, to be cleared to be allowed to play. So it's definitely not, cut and dry situation still, but it's still positive news in my opinion for people for this weekend, though, because a lot of these guys could play in that shorter window than they had been, that they have been, subjected to before.
Yeah, that's right. But speaking specifically about this Colts Raiders game, this is a tough one to figure out. Obviously, it's a huge difference if it's Sam Ehlinger versus Wentz at quarterback. As much as we rag on Wentz, and he's earned it, but it's definitely one of those where it's a big difference. And it's funny. I was tracking the line movement of this game. It was opened up at 7.5. As soon as that Wentz news broke, it dropped all the way down to 1.5. It's now been bet back up to 6.5 in most outlets. So obviously, bettors are thinking that Wentz is going to play.
Yeah, it's a huge difference. I mean, teams still are going to stack the box trying to stop Jonathan Taylor, but Wentz can at least keep him a little more honest. And he's made some big plays at times. Like you said, he deserves all the criticism that he does get, but he's played pretty well at times. And I think he's been an upgrade for them at quarterback this season. So it's a huge difference. And, I'm not touching this game until I know that Wentz is playing before I make any bets on the Raiders game.
Right. It's not just Wentz. Also, it's his offensive line too. Quentin Nelson. They had 4 starters missing in that Arizona game. Not all of them are COVID. Some of them are just actual injuries too. But that's obviously a big deal. As if whether Taylor's going to have those holes to run through. He had it was a struggle last week when you lose your entire offensive line, including players just before the game. Of course, it's going to be a little trickier there. But that's a big difference. And plus, this is a big game for both teams. Both teams are fighting for playoff spots. The Raiders, they don't look the part to me, but they're 8-7. So they're still in the hunt, and this is a huge game for both teams.
Yeah, definitely. The Raiders are kind of, they're emblematic of the entire football season, in my opinion, because they're so up and down. It's just so hard to predict this year, and that's kind of how they've been throughout the
Yeah.
year. They look great one week, next week they look terrible, and they're hard to figure out. But like you said, they're still in the hunt, still got a chance to play. Could face another backup quarterback this week, which is good news for them. But I like the Colts in this one though, just because of Jonathan Taylor, and that defense is still pretty good in my opinion. I think they can shut down Las Vegas.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's interesting. Derek Carr for a while was a fantasy viable quarterback. Not really so much anymore. They haven't had Waller. I think that's a big part of it. There's some talk that Waller might try to practice today. So we'll see if that happens. Obviously, getting him back would be a big change for that lineup.
Yeah, definitely. Waller's a huge difference maker. Foster Moreau is actually a guy I kind of like this week if he does start. He's been
Yeah.
getting a few more targets. Colts haven't been good against a tight end as well. So I'm going to watch that situation. But Waller, he's a huge difference maker for Carr, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. There, Josh Jacobs got his first 100-yard rushing game and since last season, I think, last week against the Broncos. So, I don't know if you can count on that against the Colts. I think it'll be a tough ask. We'll see if Darius Leonard plays. I think that's part of it. But I do think that it's going to be one where we'll watch and see. And we're going to have to wait till Saturday, Sunday, which is pretty much true the last few weeks. Anyhow, it's been crazy this news cycle. How every 30 minutes there's some big bombshell item.
Yeah, definitely. And it's affecting the way I'm approaching championship games. I'm in a couple this week, but I'm making sure I have some viable options on my bench because you
Yeah.
don't know what's going to break. And I'm advising people to do that as well. I mean, get guys on your bench, even if you don't think. I mean, in the past, I always say start your studs and go with them in the playoffs, but it's different this year. You don't know if your stud's going to be there. So even if you have a great starting lineup with Joe Mixon, Nick Chubb, and Boston Scott's out there on your waiver wire, and he's a better option. What you have on your bench, go get him because I think you have to be smart about it. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen up to the last minute of before the inactives come out. So I would just be smart about it and make sure you have good options on your bench at all your positions because you don't know when this illness is going to strike.
Yeah, and to that point, if you got a player in the Sunday night game or the Monday night game, you need to have a pivot, and it's hard to take up a roster spot for that. And it's especially if it's a quarterback. Like last week, I was stuck starting two in a couple of places. I had Lamar Jackson. Okay, great. I'll pick up Tyler Huntley. Okay, great. Now who do I have? Okay, I'll go to but I picked up Ian Book just in case Tua went on the COVID IR just before the start of the game because I just didn't want to get stuck with a zero there.
Yeah.
Because, and it's frustrating dealing with that, but I think you need to do things like that. And granted, I would have got like 2 points, or in the Scott Fishbowl, probably negative 30. I don't know. It was pretty hideous performance, but that the Saints were just they were COVID racked as bad as anybody last week. So yeah, the point is, those standalone games, those late games, you have an extra burden there.
Yeah, most definitely. And you're going to do things you normally would never do, but championship week too, you can afford to drop some people you probably wouldn't drop as well. So I would feel, better about dropping some players you wouldn't drop early in the year because no one can pick them up,
Yeah, that's right.
as
Yeah,
well. So it's something to
yeah.
think about.
Especially if you're not going to use them, drop them. Period. Yeah, and then you can pick. I believe in picking up players to play a little defense too. And you're in a championship game. You've got a guy that is out there like a Boston Scott, like you mentioned. You may not use him, but prevent your opponent from using him. How many people lost to Justin Jackson last week? They could have picked him up, and if they had the hammer to pick him up and didn't use it, shame on them.
Yeah, I did that in one of my leagues. I picked up both Boston Scott and Dar. I'm not going to pronounce his last name with Jacksonville because I'm going to butcher it.
Ogun Benwali, yes.
Yes, I picked him up because the guy I'm playing this week in my championship had Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and his bench is not good. And I know Edwards-Helaire might not play. And then if he doesn't play and he has a really poor bench, I just picked up two of the best options on the waiver wire, in my opinion. Playing a little defense, like you said, I think it's something you should think about.
Yeah, I did that in the Flex Jake Seeley's contest, the Flex Super Flex online league, and but then I ended up using Jackson. I was like, okay, well, I actually think he's a better thing and it's a Super Flex league, and I only used one quarterback last week. It was one of those weird things. I'm loaded at wide receiver. I had 5 receivers I wanted to use, and they all produced, so that was nice. So, but I was looking at, okay, you know what? He's actually better than Trevor Lawrence this week, so let's just go Jackson, and yeah, that worked out.
Yeah, definitely. You can't always just throw those 2 quarterbacks out there if the one guy's not doing great. There's no problem at all. I have no problem at all, especially in the standard PPR format with rolling out somebody's going to rack up those catches or get those total yards. So I have no problem with that at all.
Yeah, because usually in a super flex league, I preach just start the quarterback, but I think
Yeah.
this was just a special level. And you know what? That was a league where I picked up Tyler Huntley, was planning on using him. Then obviously the news came down Christmas morning that he wasn't going to play on Sunday. So I was like, okay, great. That was the thing that got me tilted. Is there's all this news happening on Christmas Day, and I'm like, just let me step away for 30 minutes.
I agree. You can never step away at this time of year. I hate to say it. I always do the same thing. You know how work is. You got vacation days to burn. I'm like, I can't take any vacation days. It's that time of year. I'm stuck to this. I gotta get my rankings updated and keep up with the player notes and all that stuff. So
exactly. Do you have kids?
I do. I have 2 kids. I have a high schooler and a 6th grade girl.
Nice. I've got 2 high schoolers, but you have to try to make, you have to have the family work balance, and obviously Christmas, it creates a lot of that tension there too. But got through it okay. But man, just stop for a little bit, just stop spinning.
Definitely.
So you do your rankings, and for the weekly, the week, it's a tough week this week. I thought there's a couple guys I wanted to bring up at quarterback. What are you doing with Trey Lance this week?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I have him as a low end number 2. I think the upside's there. Good matchup against Houston. I know they've been playing better, but still, his rushing ability. He scored. I believe it was. Yeah, he scored 20 plus points in week 4. Had 17.5 in week 5 in his start.
Yeah.
So I think the potential's definitely there for him. I mean, in a 2 quarterback format, I'm definitely playing him. I mean, if it's your standard league, I would worry a little bit about, just because I think the floor is definitely low with him, just because, he's a rookie and you don't know what he's going to do out there. But, the rushing ability definitely helps his floor. But overall, I would consider him, in that middle pack, number 2 range, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've got him at 13. I think that's maybe a little aggressive, because we don't even know for sure that he's going to start. But I'm operating on the assumption Garoppolo can't play with that thumb injury. But we'll see. They're going to play that a little close to the vest, but the practice reports will tell the story. If he's not practicing, he's not going to play, especially at quarterback. That's always been my rule of thumb. That's why I've been tracking Lamar the same way. If he practices, okay, then I'll rank him. But for now, I'm assuming he's not going to play until he actually gets out there and practices.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I've got Lance at 13. We'll see if that sticks. I might move him a little lower, but like some of the other options that I'd use there as QB2s, like I don't like their matchup. Ryan Tannehill versus Miami. I don't want any of my quarterbacks facing Miami right now. They're a pain in the butt to play against.
Yeah, definitely. They have a great secondary. They've been playing much better lately. I know the matchups have been favorable for them, but still playing really well. Tannehill's going to be without Julio Jones. I mean, like you said, in that same range, even like Russell Wilson. That's a good question. I mean, would you play Russell Wilson or Trey Lance? I may actually lean Lance here, because Wilson's just been so bad. I was just writing about him. I don't understand what's going on with him. It baffles me, especially with Lockett and Metcalf. Is it the play calling? Is it him being timid? I don't know what's going on. He just needs a change of scenery, in my opinion. I don't know if he's checked out for the year because they're out of it or what, but he just does not look good, in my opinion, right now. And he's a guy that is falling way down in my rankings.
Yeah, so I have them back to back. I have them 12 and 13 respectively, but it's because it's Detroit. Although I don't think Detroit's terrible anymore, but they've actually been playing pretty hard defensively. But I think he came back too soon. That's my theory, and I think that he's not able to make the throws that he needs to make still. I think he does it at times, but I think he needs a full off season. I do think he needs a fresh start. I think Seattle's got a bit of a malaise. I think that offensive line is terrible in Seattle. I think that's all a big part of it. But we also might be at the decline phase of his career. It's possible. I mean, I don't think he scrambles nearly as well as he used to. And it's hard to go from a scrambling quarterback to being a pocket passer. Maybe not having the same sight lines that he used to have. That he can't see the field as well. These are some of my theories I'm going with. I don't know. I think it's complicated.
No, I think that's a great point, especially with the scrambling aspect, because he's always had a fairly suspect offensive line throughout his career, and it's always been him kind of improvising, making the plays on the run. But like you said, he doesn't move quite as well as he used to. Maybe he is in the decline phase of his career. It's something to definitely keep an eye on.
Yeah, for sure. One other quarterback before we move on to other positions. Joe Burrow. He won people games last week, but this week he faces the Chiefs. And if you're talking week 5 Chiefs, you'd be like, yes, I can't wait. But what we've seen from the Chiefs lately, ever since Chris Jones moved to the middle, they're a tough nut to crack. I think they're a pretty tough pass defense.
Yeah, definitely. They have a great pass defense. They, like you said, since they've moved Chris Jones, it's just been a different animal for them. They've just looked. It's just night and day, in my opinion. I don't understand how how they've had such a turnaround. It's just absolutely crazy to me. I still love Joe Burrow though. Even in that matchup against Kansas City, I think he's gonna, produce a big game. I still have him 5th overall in my rankings for this week. So I still think he's gonna have a good showing this week, despite the tougher matchup. Tough for me to, get down on too much after last week's monster performance.
Right. And I think the Bengals are better when they throw. I think that's hard to get away from that. I know they went through a stretch where they're like grinded out against the Raiders. They're that way. They ran the ball a ton against the Steelers a little bit too, and then definitely against the Broncos. So that was just an ugly game all around. They won, but it was an ugly game. But I have them at 6, so I'm kind of right there with you. I put Brady, Mahomes, Stafford, Allen, and Rodgers all ahead of him, but everybody else is behind him.
Yep. I'm similar to that too. I have Mahomes, Rodgers, Allen, and Brady ahead of them.
Okay, we're pretty close there.
Yep.
Cool. We're going to continue going through some of the top news and ranking issues of the week. I'm here with Jeff Paur, but first we got a quick note from Yahoo. The NFL season is heating up, and Yahoo is going big on daily fantasy football this season. There will be a ton of big prize contests throughout the year on Yahoo, including multi-entry contests now being shark-free. To celebrate Yahoo going big on DFS, as well as Yahoo Daily Fantasy becoming shark-free, Yahoo is giving all users the opportunity to claim free $10 in site credit. Users can take advantage of this free $10 site credit offer to join any paid contest, including Yahoo's biggest contest, the weekly $1 million DFS NFL Baller Contest. The weekly $1 million contest features $1 million in total prizes, including first place receiving $100,000 and tons of overlay and prizes. Play daily fantasy football on Yahoo this season. Visit sports.yahoo.com/dailyfantasy/welcome to claim the free $10 offer to get started. All right, I'm here with Jeff Paur from RTSports. RT is running playoff leagues, so jump on there. I love playing in playoff leagues, Jeff. I've done a bunch of them over time, either on various platforms, and sometimes even just like we'll just score it ourselves. Like I've done one on with the radio show every year that we just do a spreadsheet on. I love doing playoff drafts. I think it's a blast to just find a way to have some skin in the game.
I agree. They're a lot of fun if you've never done them. There's different formats you can do as well. Like you said, we have this huge fantasy championship shootout that we do, $50,000 grand prize. It's kind of like our big fantasy championship game, but for the playoffs. You can only pick 2 players from each team, though. So there's a lot of strategy involved. You have to figure out these teams that are going to advance the farthest. And this season, it's anybody's guess who's going to make the Super Bowl. So
Right.
They're a lot of fun, though. We have different formats, all different things you can do. Just go to rtsports.com. You can check out everything we have to offer. Like Jeff said, though, that they're a lot of fun if you've never done them. I highly suggest it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different ways to do it. Sometimes you can do a one and done where you can use a player once and then you're done using them. So you have to kind of try to figure out who's going to be around at the end, but because you don't want to like have nobody to use, but you don't want to have that high scoring guy that goes out in the conference finals or whatever, and then not get a chance to use them at all too. So that's one way to play it. I do another one where we do it's a snake draft, and what we do is you're trying to bankroll teams. You're trying to try to get multiple guys on a top team that's going far. But if you're back in the draft, you may not be able to get that. So you have to try to decide best available versus best remaining from a team you're trying to back up. And I like that tension, that decision you have to make too.
Yeah, tough decisions with that format too. Like you said, there's all different ways you can play it, and that's what's kind of different about the fantasy playoffs, because there's so many different ways you can go about setting up a league. We do commissioner service too for playoffs as well. So like you said, you can play around with it and figure out different ways to run a league and invite your buddies and just have some fun. Keep playing fantasy football. Just because regular season's over with doesn't mean you have to stop.
Right. And RT has always run great leagues. I've played a number of times. They're playing the labor leagues there on RT. So it's a good product. Check it out. And especially if you want to jump in and you don't have a league already, or if you want to have a place to host your league, check that out. Let's talk running backs, Jeff. There's some interesting names in the top 15 or so that you wouldn't have expected this time of year. Starting with Rashad Penny. Now Rashad Penny is a feature back, 135 rushing yards last week against the Bears. Home game against Detroit. How high do you have Penny?
I actually have him 14 this week. I love Penny this week. Like you said, 100-yard games, 2 of 3, double-digit carries, 4 straight. Detroit's allowed 100-plus rushing yards, 3 of 4, and 180-plus rushing yards 4 times this season. So they've been susceptible against the run. I think Penny's going to have another good showing. So I have him just outside, that running back one area.
I actually have him 8th. Believe it or not, I'm way bullish on him. I don't know. The one thing that's a negative is he doesn't catch a lot of passes, or at least he didn't last week. And they do have DJ Dallas. They do have Travis Homer. Those guys could jump in. I thought it was noteworthy. Alex Collins was just a scratch last week. They're done. The Alex Collins story is done. And I actually had him in some places, and he port in a storm. You got it. Sometimes you need it. It's desperate, but I think Penny is the better upside player. So I'm glad to see him healthy for a change. I'd like to see this happen next year. He could be the lead back. We'll see what they do with the Seattle team. I mean, what they do with Carson, if he even comes back to this team again. I would really like to see Penny get a shot at being the lead back.
I would too. There's always been a lot of hype surrounding him every season. It seems like, like you said, though, it's been injury. He just hasn't been able to stay on the field. He can stay on the field. Definitely super talented back, and he's showing his potential right now, because this is really the first time he's been able to run with the job, and he's done a great job with it. So it'd be interesting to see what he can do over a full season.
Damian Harris had 3 touchdowns last week. He came into the week having missed the prior week with a hamstring injury. He was listed as questionable, had some limited practices, but Ramondre Stevenson was out with COVID, and Harris went nuts. The 3 touchdowns. Now he gets a home game against Jacksonville. This is a pretty choice setup for him.
It is, definitely. I have him right behind Penny, ironically, just for kind of the same reason you mentioned, because he doesn't catch passes. So that limits his value a little bit. I know you have to love his touchdown potential in this game against Jacksonville, but still it worries me a little bit that he doesn't catch passes. So that's why he's not in that elite category just yet, but he should have another good game. I think he could hit the 100-yard rushing mark. He has 100-yard rushing games 2 straight. So he's been really good, despite not getting, a ton of work, because his season high in carries is 23, but he's usually around that, 14, 15 mark. So he's still producing pretty well despite that, in that, very good run Patriots offense.
Yeah, he is. He really is. And that's the thing about the Pats all along is, they can run. It's just a question of who's going to get the ball that particular week. And it's been worse in other years. I still remember like the Jonas Lewis thing. Jonas Gray thing, 4 touchdowns one week, oversleeps, misses, is late to practice the next, and you never hear from him again. But that's them in a nutshell. Ronald Jones, awesome matchup against the Jets. The Jets are the worst team against running backs fantasy wise. However, do we know that Jones is going to get, how much work is he going to get? Is Keyshawn Vaughn going to cut into his work? He still might have enough. Even though Vaughn was active last week and had the long touchdown, Jones still had 20 carries. I think Jones is another good start this week. And I hate to admit it, because he's burned me so many times.
Yeah, I like Jones a lot this week. I have him 13th in my rankings, just because of the volume last week. He had 20 carries despite Vaughn having that big run. He still was the back. You have to worry about him in the passing game too, because he's had a lot of drops in his day. I think he's actually a competent pass catcher, but he just has, for whatever reason, had issues on game day. So it's intriguing to me to what he can do in this matchup, because I could see Tampa Bay getting up big, having to run the ball a lot late in the game to kill the clock. I know they don't always do that because it's Tampa Bay and they like to still throw the ball late in the game. But even with that said, I think Jones could get a lot of work and have a huge, huge game this week.
What are you doing with Zeke Elliott?
Zeke Elliott, I still have him in the top 10, and it's mainly just because he's finding the end zone. Even though he's not doing much else, because he's getting his carries, but he's just kind of plodding along. But he's finding the end zone. I like the rushing matchup for Dallas in this one. I like both Pollard and Elliott this week against a Cardinals rush defense that has really kind of gone south recently. They're a team that's reeling. I think both backs are going to do well in this game, and I like them both for this week.
Yeah, he has had a resurgence the last 2 weeks after some really, turgid outings prior to that. What about Saquon Barkley, what are you doing with him? How buried is he in your rankings?
Yeah, I have him right outside the top 20. It's just so hard. I mean, he's getting the work. He just can't find any room to run, and you
Yeah,
have to think one of these times he's going to break a long run off, and he's still super talented, and I like his ability, but he's just not getting it done, and it's crazy to me to have him ranked behind Devin Singletary and even Melvin Gordon this week, but that's where I have him right now, and I don't have much faith in him. I think he's always capable just because he's really talented, but just not a player I'm very high on right now.
I'm with you. I've got him at 25, and I have him ahead of Singletary, but behind like Deonta Foreman, Devontae Freeman, Cordell Patterson. I've kind of got lower this week. Finally, he only played 25 snaps last week. I don't know why Atlanta's limiting him as much as they are, but they are. And there was a close game last week, and he played as few as snaps basically, which is kind of scary.
Yeah, definitely, and he's not getting work in the passing game right now too, which is a concern for me,
Yeah.
with his value, because that's always helped him even when he hasn't, done much on the ground running the ball, but he's got those catches. He's not even getting the catches right now, so I have him a lot lower than I have in recent weeks as well.
Yeah. Boston Scott, is he this week's Justin Jackson?
Oh, I don't think so. I don't trust that situation. I like the matchup because Washington's kind of reeling right now, but they're not very good against the pass, so I think they're going to have more success throwing the ball. I just don't know if I totally trust Scott in the situation, how they use him, and how Philadelphia uses their backs. Kind of another situation. If Jordan Howard is healthy, I think he's going to be in the mix as well. I don't think he has quite Justin Jackson potential, in my opinion.
Think you're probably right. It's a good matchup, but it's not like a smash matchup. And as you alluded, he might have to share like goal line carries. We'll see what happens to Jordan Howard and his stinger. I think that's we'll see. Then again, the practice reports are going to tell the story for us. We know Miles Sanders is not going to play. They could do something like put Kenneth Gainwell in goal line situations just to mess with us, because that's what they do. But yeah, I've got him in the top 20. I do
Oh,
have
wow.
him as a startable back. But again, there's some fluidity to those rankings. I always do an update on Thursday and another one Saturday night / Sunday morning. And frankly, and as news breaks, if anything huge happens. One last running back situation before we move on to wide receivers. What are you doing with the Chiefs running backs? What are you doing with Darrell Williams? What are you doing with Derek Gore? I'm assuming no CEH this week.
Yeah, I'm assuming that too. I really like Williams a lot. I know Gore had some play last week, but
Mm-hmm.
Williams has been the back when CEH has been out, and he's had 2 games with 20 plus fantasy points. He's racked up the catches too. He has 2 games, one with 9 catches, another with 6, and he has at least 3 catches, 3 of 4 games. So even with Edwards Hilaire in the lineup, he's been getting catches. So I like that aspect of his game. I think it could be a shootout. I think he has top 20 potential. I actually have him 23rd right now in my rankings,
Yep.
Darrell Williams, but I think he definitely could be a guy that could actually outperform my current ranking at this point, because I think the potential's there for a high scoring game, a lot of fantasy points. I think he's going to catch passes as well.
And just news that kind of came down with the Bengals. Jermaine Pratt, one of their linebackers, is just put on the COVID list. They're already without one of their other top linebackers in Logan Wilson. So, that's something you look for, is like maybe the Chiefs will look to exploit that. I think that could help Williams. So I have him at 24. So I'm right there with you. I think he could, with the potential for a higher upside. I just worry that maybe Gore cuts into his workload a little bit, but I wouldn't pick too much apart from last week because it was such a blowout against the Steelers. So I wouldn't really look into the workload issue so much. Once they knew that CEH was hurt, they probably didn't want to expose Williams as much once the game was in hand.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat with you. I think that's why it was kind of a game flow situation with why Gore got a little more playing time there. I'm not quite too worried about him in this matchup.
Right on. Before we move to wide receivers, one last read from our friends at Thrive. Thrive is back for another season of fantasy football, and they're running huge guaranteed contests each week this NFL season. With Thrive Fantasy, you can eliminate the countless hours of research and focus on only the top-tier athletes that have the biggest impact on the game. Sign up today and get a free 6-month Rotowire subscription. Here's how you claim your free Rotowire subscription. 1, visit rotowire.com/thrive. 2, deposit a minimum of $10 and receive a 100% deposit bonus up to $100. And 3, play in your first paid contest and receive that free 6-month Rotowire subscription. Thanks to our friends at Thrive. Thanks to the Blue Wire Network for hosting all of our podcasts this season. I'm here with Jeff Paur from RT Sports. Jeff is in the finals of the Scott Fish Bowl, one of 20 people still left in that contest. So we're going to be cheering him on. He was in my league, so I guess it's a mixed bag. I drafted so poorly that you could put together such a monstrous lineup, but especially because we were right next to each other, so I shouldn't be too happy about it. But I am happy for you. We've met a few times in Vegas at FSTA and all that, so I always like someone that I know doing well. But let's talk wide receivers real quick because some interesting ranks this week. Tell me, what are you doing with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett and all, and just the Seattle game as a whole?
I don't trust them. It seems like it's one or the other every week. So it's, I mean, you can't really bench them if you have them on your team because you probably used a lot of draft capital on them and they're probably your best options and they still have high ceilings, but I have them both outside my top 20. I actually have DK Metcalf. I think I have him 27 right now. And I know he scored last week, but he still had just 2 catches.
Yeah.
Previous week he had 12 targets. So that was encouraging, but then went back down, just had 2 catches last week. So they're just hard guys to trust right now. It seems it's one or the other. And I have a hard time, feeling great about them, either of them in this, even if it's a pretty good matchup against the Lions.
Yeah, I've got them 19-20 respectively, but only because like there's certain guys that aren't playing this week or there's bad quarterback issues. Like Terry McLaurin, I have below him right now. I have like Ayuk and Mooney below them, but and it's close. It's really close. I mean, I also have Amon-Ra St. Brown at 30. I haven't fully bought in, but I can move him a little higher too. We'll see. But it's really hard to say, okay, you shouldn't be starting Metcalf. Like, you're really going to start Hunter Renfrow over DK Metcalf? Yeah, I am. I would do that. So that's one of the tough ones. A couple other guys I thought that let's talk St. Brown a little bit here. You talked about how you drafted it. You actually saw the value and drafted him, but didn't have the ability to hold on to him. Maybe there's bye weeks and all that kicks in. But what are you doing with him next year? What are you doing with this week, and what are you doing with him next year?
That's a great question. I still love him this week. I mean, last week was what sold it for me because he still produced with the quarterback situation that they had. I mean, he has double-digit targets 4 straight games, so he's getting a ton of volume, 20-plus points, 3 of those 4 games. So I love him. I actually have him 14 in my rankings this week. Okay. I still think I trust him, and I'm plugging. I actually have him in one of my championship games, and I'm plugging and playing him, and I'm feeling good about him. Next year, I don't know. It worries me a little bit to what they're going to do. Obviously they're going to need to add some more weapons at wide receiver because it's him and that's it. So I could see them going all in on somebody, maybe, bumping him down a little bit. But I still think he definitely has some potential, talented guy. He's definitely progressed this year. He's shown that he's, grown from early in the year, which, was a reason I probably let him go because he did next to nothing the first 3 weeks. But now he's getting going, and I still think he has some potential going forward. I want to see what they do in the offseason, but he's a player that I'm kind of, feeling pretty good about going forward.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's going to be Goff as his quarterback next year just due to the cap hit. But, even if they cut him, they only save like $500,000. So I think at least through next year, you'll see Goff at quarterback. And I don't see why they cut him, actually, but we'll see. I mean, I especially with next year's draft class not being that great anyhow. I think you just ride with Goff because you can see how ugly it can get otherwise there on the waiver wire in real life. A couple other guys I thought of note here that are kind of interesting. I do agree that St. Brown's pretty is getting close to the circle of trust, but you're going to be watching Adam Thielen very closely. You've got him in Fishbowl. I don't think he's going to play. I saw the way he reacted to that injury. I'm pretty pessimistic.
Yeah, I'm not high on him either. He was in and out of that game. It looked like he was done at one point when he went down with his ankle and was really frustrated, kind of threw his helmet. So obviously not right. It's a huge game for them. That would be the only reason that I think he might try to gut it out again, just because it's such a big game for them and they kind of need him out there. But, if he's not effective and he's not doing a great job on the field, I could see them maybe, holding him out, like you said.
Yeah. If Thielen does not play, where does KJ Osborne rank for you?
Oh, good question. I would put him, I wouldn't bump him up, in a crazy territory, maybe around that 30-ish mark. because he's definitely, he had 7 targets last week, even with Adam Thielen out there, and he has 7+ targets, 3 or 4 games. So he's getting some volume, and I think they could be playing from behind against Green Bay, having to throw the ball. So I know Green Bay has a good secondary, but even with that said, if they're playing from behind, they're going to have to throw it. I would move him up in that 30th range. I think he definitely has some potential for this week.
Cool. Any other sneaky plays at wide receiver that you like this week?
Good question. Sneaky plays. I actually kind of like Robbie Anderson a little bit this week. One guy I kind of
that's sneaky.
Moving up my rankings. He has double-digit targets, 2 or 3 games. Quarterback situation's been terrible for them, but he's still playing his best. He hasn't done much at all this year, but he's playing his best of late. So that's kind of encouraging to me. I think he's better if Sam Darnold's throwing him passes, but still, he's getting a lot more volume lately. So he's a guy I kind of have moved up a little bit in my rankings. Rashad Bateman, too, is another guy that I think could have a good game this week, in a game that I think Ravens are going to have to score some points against the Rams. I know they have a good secondary, but still, they've been a little susceptible to the pass. I think he could get volume, too. Laquan Treadwell's another guy that is inching up my rankings. At least 4 catches, 5 straight games. So not flashy, but consistent. And that's all you can ask for, sometimes. So I think he's a guy that I would, consider using as maybe a, low end number 3 if you're desperate for a flex play this week.
Yeah, I've got Treadwell at 40. But that's right in the range, obviously. It's kind of like the guys around him are like Marquez Callaway, Michael Gallup, Van Jefferson. I actually like Jefferson a lot this week, too. My colleague Jim Coventry calls the Ravens a pass funnel right now because of their secondary injuries. So I think that I do like it. And I think you're right about Bateman. I think he's a fun player. He's going to be a really good player in this league, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I'm really high on him. I think he's a very exciting player. And even Marquise Brown's been better this year. I know he has at least 5 catches, 5 straight games. So he's been really consistent. Despite not having a ton of yards at times, but still he's been a lot more consistent than last year, which was a very frustrating season for Brown owners.
Indeed. Jeff, let's talk about you a little bit. I know you've been in the with RT for a while, but how long, how did you get your start?
I actually used to, did the local newspaper scene type thing, but then I got a job with the Sporting News, and I was in the books department there as an editor for a few years. And then after that, with them, I moved up and started doing fantasy stuff with Sporting News after a couple seasons in the book department. And then we all know the Sporting News kind of went a little, downhill there. Did a lot of moves and whatnot, reorganization. And then I got hooked up with these people at Real Time Fantasy Sports, and I've been with them for 16 years now. So I've been in the industry. I was with the Sporting News for about 5 years. So I've been in the fantasy industry, almost 20 years now. So I've been doing this a long time. Yeah. Got my start with the Sporting News. I was more doing baseball stuff, but now I've moved to the football side. I've always been a better football player, in my opinion.
Okay.
That's how I got my start, at Sporting News. Now I'm here at Real Time Fantasy Sports. Been doing it for close to 20 years now.
Yeah, I knew you'd been a long time. I wasn't sure exactly when you started, but we started in '97. I saw you at a lot of conferences, so yeah. I knew you've been around for a really long time. But you're a St. Louis guy, right? I'm looking at your Cardinals thing in the background there. So with the Rams gone, who do you root for?
I root for the Chiefs. My son's kind of adopted them as his team.
Okay.
We actually saw a Chiefs game against Tennessee this year. It was a terrible game.
It was
Tennessee, if you remember, but
I do.
We made the trip there, but it's kind of been my team now. The Chiefs, rooting for them. They're still in our state, so I'll lay claim to them.
Okay, that's cool. So, like, my folks are in Wichita, Kansas. I went to high school there, but I don't really claim being from Kansas. But I was only there for 3 years. But my brother and my parents, they're Chiefs fans, so they can share that with you there. Just a 3-hour drive, so just from the opposite direction, basically. But they're a fun team. So this is a big week. So I'm a Bengals fan. So we're kind of at loggerheads here. But because I grew up in Indy, but before the Colts moved there, I think I was 12 years old when the Colts moved to Indy, and they were terrible. So I just stuck with the Bengals. I started with them, and my dad is one who made me a Bengals fan. I stayed, he switched, but go figure. Anyway, I'm hoping the payoff's there. Now we've got Burrow. I've waited all this time. Maybe they're actually good. Who knows? Don't get my hopes up too high, but
they definitely have the potential. I love that offense, man. Those three weapons at receiver, Burrow. You guys are set for a while offensively, so exciting times to be a Cincinnati fan, in my opinion.
Yeah, it is. It is. And then, hopefully we can address like defense and the offensive line in the draft next year because we got all the skill position players we need. So be interesting to see how that comes to fruition, but should be a lot of fun. Jeff, I want to thank you for joining us today. This was a lot of fun. Good luck in the Scott Fish Bowl finals and all your finals.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. I had a lot of fun talking with you.
Yeah, I did as well. You bet. And you can follow Jeff on Twitter at Jeff Paur. That's Paur. And of course, check out RT Sports' playoff leagues. All sorts of different ways to play their contest or or host your own league. So check that all out. We got tomorrow. We got Mario and John. Thanks for listening to the Rotowire Fantasy Football Podcast. Have a great day.